Good morning. Thank you for being here for this service at the Betsuine and for this Dharma talk. It's been a while since I've been here to speak and share with you, and there's so much to think about and to say. But before we do, we should actually pause for a moment and just say Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu. It's always important to keep the Nembutsu teaching as the surrounding for what we do, say, and act and everything. So much has been happening of late. The coronavirus is still with us. Many of us are still engaged in stay-in-place orders, though some areas are relaxing. And sadly, but it was predicted by scientists that the coronavirus would increase if we let down our guard, and that's what's happening. And more people are suffering and dying because of this. This is a great tragedy. Um, but we have to deepen our resolve and commitment and discipline. So many other things have been happening as well. Social issues around our country, the Black Lives Matter issue, the murder of George Floyd. That was a terrible, terrible thing to witness. Um, it leads one to just despair or to be in disgust at all that's happening and how to respond. But we're fortunate that in this time we have our Buddhist teachings. And I have been greatly increased in hope by statements that were just recently released by our bishop, Moriyake Ito, that was posted on the internet just recently, his Awakening to Social Justice and his statement against injustice and support of Black lives. I stand 100% behind these writings. I agree perfectly with them. Some of you may not have read them, some may disagree, but the virtue of Buddhism is that it is a very, very big tent and is open for much discussion. But I think our Buddhist teachings need to address social justice issues and get to the heart of the matter of who and what we are. And so I would like to pose for you a question. Are you an individual or a social creature? Most of you will think that you were born as an individual on such and such a date. Me, almost 68 years ago in Santa Monica. I'm there given a name and all sorts of labels. But I would like you to think a little bit different, that maybe we're not totally just individuals with our own individual rights and our own individual wants and needs and perspectives. We were conceived as social beings. In the process of our conception, once that biological process began going, if we were fortunate, implantation occurred and the cells that were going to form you and me were bonded into our mothers. The blood vessels attached, the placenta was configured around us, and the tubes that would bring us food, air, recycle, all that needs to be recycled was all part of it. We were intimately involved as part of our mothers. She was our support system, our life raft, our everything. Without that, we would not have been born. We would not be here. For 9 months, we dwelt beneath our mother's heart. The one sound that we all heard was her heartbeat, surrounding us, flowing through us, everything. So we were initially social beings, social creatures. None of us were conceived as individuals and just plopped out elsewhere. This is something to think about, maybe a little gross for some of you, but this is a very, very important part of our life, our dynamics. And when we were born, yes, we were separated, the cord was cut, but we were still dependent on our mother's care, on the nurses and doctors around us. We had to be fed, we had to be changed. We were given so much in our start of life. But fundamentally, our social existence is foundational to our very existence. And I think Buddhism addresses this and sees to it. And I want to read for the moment a passage from Bishop Ito's Awakening to Social Justice. Let me see if I can find the right spot here. In Buddhism, we constantly try to understand and appreciate the interdependence of the world, how we cannot exist alone, how we are dependent on others, how each of us are tied together in a vast web of karmic relationships, how spiritually we all are brothers and sisters. If we truly understand these truths, we would treasure and appreciate one another. Buddhism also teaches us that unfortunately, we tend not to understand or appreciate these truths because of our innate selfishness. Consequently, we tend to see the world in terms of our own desires, our likes and dislikes, through eyes of greed and anger, and ultimately through our ignorance. Fortunately, we have the Buddhist teachings to guide and remind us of the great and universal and eternal truth that in the end, we are part of a greater whole, that in the end, we are not separate, but one. When I came to Buddhism, when I came to really study and appreciate it, the form of Buddhism that I was presented is one that has been conditioned, packaged for an American audience, which perhaps overemphasized the individuality aspect of things. It took many years to realize that there was a deepness to the teachings that were underlying the most simplest things that we were being presented. But if we look at these teachings at their deepest, the foundational teachings of Buddhism, we will see that social justice, social issues are part and parcel of the teachings. You cannot have it without this. Thich Nhat Hanh clearly stated that an engaged Buddhism is Buddhism. And so this is something that we need to bear in mind. When we look at the Four Noble Truths, we are generally presented, first truth, there is suffering, and that I suffer, that I have distress. Everything is done in terms of me, what I call the unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. My problems, my this, my that, my wants. Why am I experiencing this? And that's good to a point, but it's only good to a point, because there is more. When we begin to realize that there is a social aspect to us, I talk about me, myself, and I as an individual, but on our social aspects, we are also we, ourselves, and us. And what I call the Buddhist swear words of me and mine, we must also add we and ours. I think that is foundational to really grasp what's happening in the Four Noble Truths. When we look at our suffering, our distress, we suffer not just as individuals, but also as social beings, as people within a society conditioned by our culture, our language, by historical events. And so we suffer as a people. That is part of our package, as so many people are upset or angry or can't understand why other groups are having problems with us and everything, or we with them and all that, because we neglect this dimension. So we need to approach the First Noble Truth as me and we, as myself and ourselves, and as I and us. So I and we and me, ourselves, myself, we are all suffering distress. We are all put at diseasement. And when we look at the second noble truth, that the cause of our suffering is our holding on and our clinging. Usually we take this as to what I cling to, what I want and need. And these are very basics. And I think we start with ourselves, but then we need to expand the view, to expand the picture. So I cling to the things that make me happy, but part of what makes me happy or content is my social identity, my social status, my being part of a group, as in my case, as an American citizen. I view America as best place to live as opposed to everywhere else. And I'm certain that people in their own home countries view their home as the best place to live. And so this is something to bear in mind. So when I hear or see that our country is losing out on some things, then I feel unhappy about it. Or at the Olympics, I cheer our team and our people, and I'm disappointed if they don't get that gold medal and everything, which is really interesting because the Olympics were originally designed not to be that way. It was all supposed to be the world gathering together to share in physical educational excellence, to be able to perform at the top of one's ability, that we should be cheering for everybody and to applaud the very best of the best. But immediately we put flags and anthems right at the top of the list. And so that's something we need to look at, why we need to crave or do this. But this is part of the identity that we've established, because when you were born, you were given a name, you were given a religion, you were given political views, you were given a racial designation and status. None of this you asked for, but you were born with them, and they formed the template of our identity, what we call our self, which the Buddha wisely noted is what's tripping us up. When we look at the third noble truth, of course, the Buddha says there's either a cure or there isn't. And the third noble truth is that there is a resolution to this, that there is something to help us to face up to the problems of me and we, myself, ourselves, and I and us. And that is the fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Noble Path. What's interesting about the Noble Path, let me check my list here so I don't do this. No, we get the list, right view, thought, so on. But almost half the Eightfold Steps are steps that deal with our relationships with others, our social dynamics, right speech, that we speak, that we communicate, that we share each other. That is fundamental to our social issues, fundamental to what's going on in social justice, that we are not respecting the rights and needs of others. So right speech is one of them. Right action, how we engage. The Buddha did not tell us to right passivity, go sit under a tree and meditate all day. He wanted his monks, those who were intensely following, to engage with the populace. He insisted that the monks would go to the villages each day to beg for food. That meant interaction. That meant the monks had to go humbly asking for food from people who, socially speaking, would view themselves as being superior. A beggar ask from someone who has and everything. So he wanted us to take on this view of what it's like to be a beggar, to be someone who's requesting, asking for help. That's something to think about when we see people, the homeless on the streets. These are all potential Buddhist monks waiting to be helped and everything. And then we look at right livelihood, our jobs and professions, how we engage. Sometimes we're very simplistic about right livelihood and everything, but our jobs, our professions affect the economy, and the economy on the politics and everything else. And so are we engaging in work that is benefiting the larger society, or is it just to make somebody upstairs a little bit more richer and me a little bit more poorer? And then right effort. Effort, again, is another action aspect that we are supposed to go forward, make an effort, make a engagement. So half the Eightfold Noble Path is dealing with our social dynamic. I think this is something, when we read these statements from our district offices, from our bishops, Rimban, or from other ministers who are speaking on this matter, that we listen to these teachings, because they are here to instruct us and to help us to live the fullness of our Buddhist life. We see this in the life of the Buddha. He accepted all manners of peoples into the Sangha. There was a social stratification. The religious people, the upper class was the rulers, there was the mercantile class, and then there was basically the working poor, the serfs and slaves. Buddha accepted all these people in, and everybody was brought to a position of equality. The only difference was whoever was ordained further along had seniority and theoretically would know more about the Dharma and could teach those who are coming right after. I got to share as a little bit of a joke, but when Peter and I were ordained and we got online for our Tokudo ordination, I made it a point to put myself behind him so that he was ordained 1 second ahead of me, so that I would have the, the pleasure and benefit of bowing to him, to receive teaching from him and everything. So I take this seriously and everything. It is good not to be first and everything. That's something I need to be reminded of. So where do I go with this? Our teachings are fundamental. And when we look at them with clear eyes and put aside the spectacles that form our made up identity of what are my politics or social status or country of origin or everything else, then when we look at things with naked eyes, we see ourselves and everyone else as we really are, people in need of the Dharma, people who need the wisdom and compassion that is represented by Amida Buddha, the Buddha of infinite compassion and wisdom. If we guide ourselves by this kind of light, if we form ourselves anew under this kind of teaching, I think we will find ourselves better equipped to deal with others, to listen to others. Our Jodo Shinshu practice, as we often say, is listening. A lot of times we listen and already form our words in our head so we can interject to straighten them out and get them in line. But real listening requires an emptying of ourselves to receive the other into us. We have many people in our country who are hurting. They've been hurting for centuries. There's built up rage and anger and tears at being treated the way they have been treated. It is something that I've had to owe up to. As you can see among the ministers, I'm the white minister present. So owning up to my white privilege and my male privilege, which has often sheltered me from seeing reality as it is something that I need to face, take down, and open my ears, my heart. The only thing that should be closed is my mouth, and to listen and receive. I remember Joni Martinez once said that we should imagine ourselves as having a teacup of our head, and it's filled to the brim. But when we bow in Gasha, when we say Namu Amida Butsu, we bow and that tea ego pours out. It is only when the cup is empty that we can receive what the other has to give us. That is my Dharma talk for the day. And I hope that you will have an opportunity to reflect and to think deeply for yourself on what is important for you within the Dharma, how to best live it, how we may all help each other. And I hope that when time comes, we will be able to gather together to talk and share about what we've experienced. And so let us put our hands together and say, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu. Thank you. Have a good day. Stay safe and stay sane. Thank you.